This is 1.5 notes, body planes and cavities. The essential question is, what are the major body cavities and which organs are found in each cavity? There are 3 body planes or sections. These are imaginary flat surfaces that divide the body into 2 portions. The first one is called sagittal or medial. It divides the body into the right and left halves. The frontal is also called coronal, which divides the body into the anterior and posterior section. Remember, anterior means front and posterior means back. So frontal section divides the body into the front and back portions. The last one is called transverse or cross section. This divides the body into the superior and inferior portion. Recall again, superior means above and inferior means below. So transverse section divides the body into the top and lower half. The first picture on the left shows the median plane. Notice the picture shows a plane going through the body, dividing to the right and left halves. The one that's pictured is called mid-sagittal because it divides the body in equal right and left portions. But the median plane can go through anywhere along that's parallel to that plane. So it could actually go through the right arm. It could go through the right shoulder, and all those would consider the median plane as long as it's parallel to the one that's pictured. The second one is showing you the frontal or the coronal plane. Again, any plane that's parallel to the one that's pictured there is considered a frontal plane. So it could actually go through the nose, even through the toes, or it could go through the back and it will be still considered a frontal plane. The last one is the transverse plane. Transverse plane divides the body into the upper and lower portions. And again, this transverse plane is showing it going through the midsection, but it could be along the top, it could go through the head, or it could go through the legs, and all of those would be considered transverse planes. The 3 pictures on the bottom is showing you different organs. Notice that the picture on the left on the bottom is the brain. Brain, looking from different views, could have a significantly different looks. Same thing with this middle picture on the bottom. That is the picture of a chest, and seeing it from the coronal view, which is the division of the front and the back, looks a lot different from the one on the right lower half where it shows the transverse plane, and notice that it looks quite differently. Here is the diagram of the brain in the 3 sections, and note how differently the brain looks in the 3 different views. Body cavities are spaces within the body which contain organs. The 2 major body cavities are the dorsal body cavity. Remember, dorsal is synonymous with posterior, which means the back side. It is made up of the cranial and the spinal cavities. The ventral, which is synonymous with anterior, which means front, is made up of the chest and the abdominal cavity. The dorsal body cavity then is further divided into the cranial and the spinal cavities. The cranial cavity houses the brain, and the spinal cavity houses the spinal cord. The ventral body cavity is divided into the thoracic and abdominal pelvic cavity. The thoracic cavity houses the lungs and the heart, but a space within the thoracic cavity called the mediastinum houses the heart. The abdominal pelvic cavity is further divided into the abdominal and pelvic cavities. There is a wall separating the thoracic and abdominal pelvic cavity, and that wall is called the diaphragm. The abdominal pelvic cavity is further divided into the abdominal and the pelvic cavity. The abdominal cavity houses the majority of the digestive organs like the stomach, liver, and the intestines, and also some of the urinary organs like the kidneys. The pelvic cavity houses the reproductive organs, some of the digestive organs like the rectum, and some of the urinary organs like the bladder and the ureter. From the diagram, you can see that the dorsal body cavity is made up of the cranial cavity and the spinal cavity. The ventral cavity is made up of the thoracic cavity and the abdominal pelvic cavity. The thoracic cavity within it has the cavity called the mediastinum, which houses the heart. The abdominal pelvic cavity is divided into the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. Because the abdominal pelvic cavity is such a large area containing many organs, doctors and other health professions use the 4-quadrant system in order to identify areas of problem when a patient walks into the doctor's office. The 4 quadrants are named the right and left upper quadrants and right and left lower quadrants. Here's a diagram of the 4 quadrants. Keep in mind that the right and left is opposite your right and left. So the right is always reference to the patient's right. Here's your right upper quadrant, which contains major organs like the liver and the gallbladder. The left upper quadrant contains organs like the stomach, the spleen, and the pancreas. The right lower quadrant contains organs like the appendix, or it could be some reproductive organs. And then the left lower quadrant usually indicates some type of an intestinal problem. Another method for dividing up the abdominal pelvic cavity is the 9 regions. It's a little bit more complicated. It almost looks like a tic-tac-toe. You must know the names of the 9 regions and the organs that are found in each of the 9 regions. The centermost region is called the umbilical, which could indicate some type of intestinal problem. Right above that is the epigastric, which could indicate heartburn or some type of stomach ailment. Just directly below the umbilical is the hypogastric or the pubic region, and a problem here could indicate problem with the bladder, or in females, a problem with the uterus. Directly left of the hypogastric region is the right iliac or the inguinal region, and problem here could indicate problem with the appendix. Directly right of the hypogastric region is the left iliac, which could indicate problems with the intestine. On either side of the umbilical is the right and left lumbar, and they contain the same organs, and in this case would be the kidneys and the large intestine. On either side of the epigastric region is the right hypochondriac and the left hypochondriac region. The problem with the right hypochondriac usually could indicate problems with the liver or the gallbladder. The left hypochondriac could indicate some type of a problem with the spleen or the stomach. Here's a diagram of the 9 regions. There are going to be some issues with confusion, like epigastric and hypogastric. Note that the epigastric is above the umbilical and hypogastric is below the umbilical. Another area of confusion would be hypochondriac and hypogastric. Note that hypochondriacs are on either side of epigastric, and hypogastric is below the umbilical. Another major issue is distinguishing between right and left. Notice that the left lumbar is on the right of the umbilical, and then the right lumbar is left of the umbilical. When you are looking at a diagram of a person, it's always going to be their left and your right, which means it's going to be always opposite of you. 1.5 notes homework assignment. Make sure you put 1.5 notes on your homework assignment. Number 1 is, which section is shown on the picture on the right? Number 2, which body cavity is the largest and which is the smallest? Number 3, what organs are found in the largest body cavity and what organs are found in the smallest body cavity?